Hey, what's up everyone, TJ here. So one of the main goals with this channel is to make snowboard reviews and help guide you as you're choosing your next board. And part of that is knowing about the characteristics and the specs you're gonna see as you're out there shopping around. So I wanted to make a quick video breaking these things down to help you get the most out of the board reviews. Let's talk about it. All right, so this video is gonna be more of an overview rather than a deep dive. And the first thing I wanna talk about is camber profile, or the bend of the snowboard. So there's two basic bends in a snowboard you're gonna come across. One is called positive camber. So that's the shape that's kind of like this, like a frowning face, and reverse camber. So that's the opposite, where it's kind of like a smiling face. You're gonna come across tons of hybrid variations of this, but let's just talk about it in terms of camber dominant and rocker dominant, or reverse camber dominant. So for a camber dominant snowboard, the main things you're gonna get out of it is a little bit more power, more energy, and more precision. Just by simply standing on a camber snowboard, you're loading up energy in the board, so it's gonna give you that more precise, powerful feel. More experienced riders tend to enjoy camber because you can get more out of the snowboard. Whereas reverse camber is gonna be a little bit easier to control, gonna have a more manageable feel. And the biggest benefits you're gonna get out of rocker or reverse camber is easier turn initiation, more leverage for presses and butters and things like that, flat ground type stuff, as well as a less catchy feel and a slight benefit in powder or soft snow. The profile you decide to go with is a completely personal choice. Each of them have a place and their own pros and cons, but this is one of the key deciding factors when you're choosing a snowboard, particularly depending what your main use case for the snowboard is, whether it's like a park board for jibbing or a big, aggressive jump board, or like a freeride powder board. The next thing I want to talk about is what we call the snowboard's contact points. So if you look at the overall shape of a snowboard, you'll notice on the nose and tail, there's one spot that is the widest point in the snowboard, and that's what we call the contact point. So that's where the board gets most of its control, where it's going to grip into the ice or snowy conditions. And it's a reference point as well on where the nose and the tail start on the snowboard as well, outside the contact points. And before we move on, I do want to also quickly mention a lot of boards are going to have additional contact points. So that's like usually in the form of bumps throughout the edge of the board. The most well-known is going to be Magna Traction from Mervin, who makes Libtech and GNU snowboards. And that's basically just going to give the board extra grip in case those main contact points slip out. You have extra contact points that can bite down on the snow. All right, so now we know where the contact points are. Let's talk about the shape of a snowboard. So there's gonna be two main types of boards. You've got directional snowboards and twin snowboards. A twin snowboard is gonna be symmetrical from tip to tail. So if you folded the board in half, it's gonna be exactly symmetrical. It's gonna ride exactly the same in either direction. Whereas a directional board, as the name implies, is meant to be in one specific direction. And typically on directional boards, one of the key characteristics is that you're gonna have a longer nose than tail outside the contact point. So the board's gonna have more surface area up front that's gonna come in handy if you ride the board in powder or soft snow to help it float better. The next thing I want to mention is a snowboard's flex. So exactly like you'd think, that's how bendy, how flexible the snowboard is. A softer flexing snowboard is typically going to be a more park or freestyle focused board that's going to be easier to do presses, easier to twist torsionally and maneuver around and things like that. Whereas a stiffer flex is going to be better for riding faster. It's going to have more stability. It's going to do better on larger features, or if you're looking for that more precise feel. You might also come across some snowboards that have a directional flex, and that means that the tail of the board is stiffer than the nose, so that you have more power in the tail as you're going exploring the resort, doing more technical lines and things like that. You're typically going to find that in more freeride focused snowboards. I also want to talk about the different base materials you're going to find in boards. There's two main types. You're going to find extruded or sintered. An extruded base is typically going to be a little bit cheaper, and it's going to be less maintenance, so you're not gonna have to wax the snowboard as often, and you're gonna be able to do at-home repairs a little bit better. So if you scrape the board on a rock or something like that, you can fill it in at home with P-Tex and it's gonna hold up a little bit better. You're gonna find that extruded base in more park-focused snowboards or entry-level snowboards, whereas sintered is a higher-end base material. It's known to be harder, faster, and more durable compared to an extruded base, but you do have to maintain the board a little bit more. You gotta wax it more often to maintain a nice, consistent glide. As you're looking at different brands of boards out there, you're gonna see different mounting systems for the bindings as well. The two main kinds nowadays is gonna be the channel system that you'll see on all Burton snowboards, and some other brands have used this now as well, like Endeavor. It's not patented, so any company could use it, but most commonly seen on Burton snowboards. And then you have your standard insert pack pattern, where the majority of brands are still using that. There is some advantages to the channel system. There's both pros and cons. I won't get into that right now, but all you need to know is that pretty much every binding on the market is compatible with both types of systems. If you are gonna ride a Burton binding though, they do make an EST binding that's exclusive to the channel system. If you don't have a channel system board and you wanna use a Burton binding, you have to get a reflex binding from Burton, so keep that in mind. All right, let's talk about some things you're gonna see on the spec sheet as you're out there looking at snowboards. I think it's really important to understand this stuff, and one of the most important specs is side cut radius. This could be a whole video in and of itself, but I'll keep it real simple for you guys here. Side cut is that curve you see in the side of the snowboard, and basically is what allows the snowboard to turn. And what you need to know is a smaller number means tighter turns, and a bigger number means longer, more drawn out turns. Typically, you're gonna find those bigger numbers on more free ride boards that feel better at higher speeds. But really nowadays, the side cut is pretty tailored to what the board is designed to do. So not something to really worry about too much, but I think it's good to understand as you're comparing different snowboards. And kind of going along with that, another spec you're gonna see for every snowboard is the effective edge. And that is basically the measurement for the distance from contact point to contact point going along the edge of the snowboard. So that's the actual amount of material that's in contact with the snow between the contact points. So anytime you're on hard pack snow, that's what you have to keep the board in control and what you're carving with. I think it's good to understand effective edge, because if you're looking at boards that are the same size from different brands or different styles, some boards have more blunted tips, so that's like less nose and tail material. And if they're the same size as a board that has a bigger nose, you're gonna have a longer effective edge. So you're gonna have more material in contact with the snow, and it's gonna ride what we would say longer. So you're gonna have more control and more precision out of that compared to another board that's the same length with a shorter effective edge. So when you see that number, that's what we're talking about. Another spec that's not as common nowadays, but I do want to bring up briefly, is called running length, and that's always going to be shorter than effective edge, and it's basically the straight line distance between contact point to contact point, whereas effective edge actually follows the curve of the board, so it's going to be a little bit longer. Just so you guys know what that is, not a huge deal for running length. All right, there's still a few important things to talk about. The next one I want to bring up is reference stance. So every snowboard has this. It's the stance position that the board dimensions are designed around. And basically that's how you know where you are on the snowboard when you're mounting your bindings. So always start there, and you can move the bindings depending what you want to do, either like evenly in or evenly out to adjust your stance width. Or if you want to move your stance position, you can move both feet the same distance back or forward to adjust the stance position. And going right along with that, let's talk about stance setback. So a lot of times on directional snowboards, you're going to find a stance setback, and that means that the reference stance is actually shifted closer to the tail. So on soft snow days, powder days, your weight is naturally further back, and it's going to help you out in powder and soft snow. And that's going to be a spec that's listed as well. So you should know if there is a setback on the reference stance. Another one for directional snowboards that you need to know about is taper. So taper just means how much the tail is narrower than the nose. And the idea with that is reducing the surface area in the tail of the snowboard to help the nose float more in soft snow. That's the main thing, but I also feel that it makes the board a lot more fun to carve and gives it a better feel for carving. Both of those, setback and taper, are gonna be pretty exclusive to directional snowboards. And the last spec you're gonna come across that I wanna make sure you guys understand is called waist width. So that's how wide the snowboard is at the very middle of the board. It's really important to consider if you have a larger boot size. And basically it's just another piece of information to help understand how the board's gonna feel. But if you do have a larger boot, like I'd say 10.5 or above, you want a pretty wide board. I'd say like 26 centimeters or wider, or look at wide options as well. At a base level though, without considering the large boots, a wider board is going to take a little bit more effort to go from edge to edge, whereas a narrow board is going to have a more nimble feel to it. And the main reason we say that if you have a larger boot size, you want a wider board is because when you start to carve more aggressively with higher edge angles, you get toe drag or heel drag, which is not fun at all. So that's the spec that's gonna make all the difference when you're looking at heel or toe drag. And the last thing you guys are gonna come across and see pretty frequently out there as you're shopping around is different additives that companies put in their snowboards. So things like carbon, flax, aramid, bamboo, urethane, all different types of stuff. The list goes on. Basically, it's either gonna like add some more snap and pop to the snowboard or offer dampening, or just various things. They're gonna modify the feel to tailor it to that specific board. I'm not gonna get into all that right now. I do more deep dives on that in each snowboard review. So like talking about for that specific board, how it's gonna feel. So check some of those videos out if you're curious, if there's a board you're looking at. But in general, I hope this video gives you a basic understanding of all the different components and things you're gonna see out there as you're shopping for your next board. If you feel like I left something out or something that could be added to this video, please leave it down in the comments. Let's make this comment section a resource for anyone checking this out. I appreciate all you guys. Please drop a like if you got some value. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. It really helps me out. I appreciate all of you guys, and we will see you in a new one next time.